Alright, how's it going everyone? And welcome to all of our new members. It is time for another Master Mentorship video. So let's get right to it, taking a look at some of these games. And the first one here is from Richard, one of our Richards, who played this game against me. So we're going to flip this around. He has the black pieces, I have the white pieces. So let's take a look. You're playing the Karo Khan, I played the classical variation. This is all pretty normal, nothing much to see so far. Knight G to F6, castles long, bishop E7, knight E4. Yeah, so we played this, this 13-move theoretical line. And you're right that you should be concerned about the build-up on the king side. That's kind of white's idea if you castle short. Black kind of has to make a choice now. Black can castle short, or black can castle long. When I'm playing the Karo Khan, I play this exact position as black. I like to castle short, so I can play for an attack on the queen side, or maybe even in the center with C5. If you castle long, it's harder for white to attack you. But I feel like black's just kind of, perpetually slightly worse in those positions, just hoping to be equal. So I prefer a fight. I like to castle short. Against knight e4, you can take and play knight f6 like you mentioned. And if I play queen e2 there, then you can play queen d5, threatening queen takes a2 and queen e4, swapping queens and helping make sure your king is safe. That's just one idea. You have to be a little bit careful, though. White can try to trip you up here and play queen d3, and here your idea doesn't work. Because here there's c4 and queen b3, and now b7's hit, the queen's vulnerable, rook e1 is coming. So there's quite a bit of theory to know in this line. I think you played it pretty decently, though, so I think queen c7 is okay. After queen c7, I just played king b1, and you simply castled short. And you said you want to play either c4 or b5. I guess you mean c5 or b5, but you thought you should castle first. You also considered castling long. Queen c7 is often associated with castling long. I think that would be the more kind of normal move here. In addition to taking and playing knight f6, that's a very normal kind of idea. But yeah, here, after you castle short, I took the invitation to play g4, a very common pawn sacrifice in this kind of position. And this can get pretty dangerous for black. If you take, of course, I can play rook g1. If you move the knight away, then bishop h6 is coming. So you swapped a set of knights first. I thought that was probably best. So knight takes, queen takes, knight f6. The only downside is my queen gets a better square now. I can come to e2 instead of being on d3. And now it's a bit harder for you. For example, if knight takes g4, rook g1, you can't play the normal move f5 to defend that knight. I guess you can play it, but then e6 falls, and I get my pawn back. And I think white has a pretty pleasant position there. So you might have considered not swapping the knights. Like after g4, you could take here right away, and you kind of have this tempo with knight takes f2 being a threat as well. There's some really crazy lines in some cases with stuff like this. Rook g1, knight takes f2, queen e3, takes. It's a lot to calculate. You have to really, assess the position concretely, of course. Here I think white's actually just winning because black's common defensive idea of bishop f6 won't work because you never traded off the e4 knight. So even though black won material there, I think it's just too hard to defend the black king here. So lots of stuff going on, but don't feel bad that, you couldn't work all this out. But let's take a look at the game. So you played knight takes e4, and then knight f6, queen e2, and yeah, taking on g4 looks pretty risky now. Maybe you could go for it. You see that knight h7 could be an idea you mentioned. I feel like knight h7 probably is the best move. That is kind of an idea in this line. It's kind of a last resort idea. But it does really bind down on the g5 square with the help of the knight and bishop. So it's probably not a bad choice here. You also give this line you considered with c5. Let's take a look at this. So c5, you thought I would take on h6 right away. I don't think I would do that. I think I'd just play g5 and bust open lines. I think my attack's just coming way too fast. Rook g1 might be coming next. I don't think I have to sack the bishop. That looks a bit... that would give you some chances to hold on to your extra material. But in the game, knight f6, queen e2, knight d5, and you said in hindsight, knight h7 might be stronger. You still think I'm going to meet c5 with bishop takes h6, and I don't think that's the best route. I'm not sure what you're seeing here. Like bishop takes h6, g takes, queen e3. Well, first of all, you probably consider, I don't know, knight g4, I can pin you. You could also just play king h7, though. And maybe I have a check, but I don't know, maybe then you just play your king somewhere else, king g7 or something. I mean, the attack's scary, but now at least you have a piece to suffer to suffer for. You're up a piece, so if my attack doesn't work, you have something to play for. But yeah, after knight d5, I thought knight e5 was pretty strong. I might want to roll the f pawn and g pawn. I might just want to improve the knight. It's just a good square for it. You said you expected c4 here. Well, if I play c4, now my king gets a little bit exposed. When we have opposite side castling, I don't want to have to play c4 in a lot of cases. Sometimes I will, if it's worth it to drive the knight away. Let's actually take a look. So if I play c4 here, I don't know, I thought here, I guess if knight b4, maybe I can just play a3. I just feel like I'm exposing quite a few squares around my king. Plus, now you have the idea to play for like a b5 break and try to blow open the b file or something. So I don't want to have to play c4 if I don't have to. I still don't think I'm going to rush with bishop h6. I think there's no conclusive checkmate there. Yeah, rook g1, bishop g5. I don't think you have to play that. I think here you might just play, I don't know, why not queen f4 or something? Bring more pieces around to the king side. I think you're rushing there with assuming that I'm going to play bishop h6. But okay, knight e5, c5. You said bishop g5 was an alternative. That's not going to work now. I'm going to play f4. Right, maybe I can't play f4 right away, huh? Because you have the knight controlling that square. Maybe it's an alternative. But okay, c5. Now I just play, I take on c5, takes g5. Okay, bishop back to d6. Knight g4, just trying to threaten to open up lines over here. And you said you only now started to see some of your own threats, such as rook c8 and a possible knight c3. I don't think they're going to work, and you mentioned that. Yeah, you couldn't really get them to work out. Yeah, black's position is kind of tough here. So you took on g5, and if I remember correctly, I had quite a bit of a think here. I wondered if I could play h6 right away, but I was worried about knight f4, I think is the move I was worried about black playing here, and I wasn't sure how to make this work out. So I did some calculation. I wasn't thrilled about bishop takes g5 either, because I saw that this gave you time to play bishop f4 and try to trade off that bishop, and maybe try to guard the dark squares a bit better. And, if I take, you get a tempo somehow, either bringing the queen over to the king's side or gaining the tempo on the queen. But it was only after I saw the sacrifice idea that I decided to go for this. So the idea is pretty cool. The idea is on bishop takes, of course h6 is a big threat. And if you do play bishop f4 here, then rook takes d5 with a winning attack. And after e takes d5, knight f6. Kind of a crushing blow there. And you resigned here. If the game continued, yeah, you have to take, I think. If you play king h8, then I have a nice move in just queen d3, I think, threatening checkmate. And if you take, then I take with check, and that's going to be a disaster. Rook g1 can follow up. So you have to take, I take, and even though there's no check here, there's really no way to stop all of my checkmate threats. I mean, you can do the analysis for yourself, anyone out there watching, but black's busted here. So don't feel bad about this one. You played pretty well overall. I can't really pinpoint, a specific, just egregious tactical blunder. Most of the games sent to me on these videos were decided because of, a miscalculation. Here, I mean, you played a master. You kind of fell behind in the opening preparation there a little bit. I knew more about the opening than you. And it's very easy to kind of drift in this opening with black and just come under a massive attack if you're not careful. So don't feel bad about that one. I hope some of my thoughts there in the more critical moments there in the middle game helped you out. Next up, you've got a game here from Nate. And Nate, you posted this in the Facebook group. In the future, if you want me to cover the game in one of these videos, please email it to me. It just helps a lot to have all the games in one spot when I'm trying to make the videos. You can certainly post in the Facebook group. That's gonna help the community give you feedback. I'm in there every day helping people out. But if you want it in the videos, please also email it to me. But I happened to cross it, wanted to include it. Wanted to welcome you to the program, of course. So here we go. Let's flip this game around and take a look. So you have the black pieces here. And looks like you lost this game. So good. We're going to get some good takeaways. e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6. We get an open Sicilian. You expected some kind of like a Lapin setup. I guess you know this guy. Takes knight f6, knight c3. Okay, and we get a Sveshnikov. So knight d to b5, d6, bishop g5, a6. This is all theory. Knight a3, b5, knight d5. Okay, this is all a main line. Bishop e7, takes, c3. So this isn't the line I'm familiar with in the Sveshnikov. I play it differently. I'm not sure if you're familiar. You probably are if you know this line. But there's another line here. Bishop takes and then knight d5. Hopefully you're also familiar with that. If not, you could ask to play that against me in one of our future correspondence games, and I could help you out there as well if you want to play the Sveshnikov with black. But your opponent doesn't choose that line, they choose this one. So this is the second game in a row with quite a bit of opening theory here. I actually want to check a database just because I'm not 100% familiar with this line, just to see where anyone strays from theory. So c3 is definitely the main move. Castles, knight c2, rook b8. Okay, that is a pretty common theoretical choice here in this line. Bishop g5 is the move I'm more familiar with, just trying to potentially free this f-pawn to advance, and also just maintain the pair of bishops for the time being. But rook b8 is interesting. Black might want to play b4 at some point to try to pry open some lines on the queen side. So let's see how this goes. Yeah, you're still in your prep. Okay, but not confident. So I guess this is kind of towards the end of your prep. This has still been played hundreds of times. I didn't know this was such a popular alternative to the main move. And white does play here h4 and g6, and that move is not very common. So I guess now we're kind of out of theory. So let's see our comments here on g6. You actually give it without a comment. So to me, that's kind of a strange reaction to h4, because by playing h4, white wants to grab space on the king side, they want to play h5. It doesn't make too much sense to me to give this pawn a lever to latch onto. Usually, white can respond to g6 with h4 and a lot of openings. So when white plays h4 before you play g6, kind of giving them a target there to open the h-file later, that doesn't seem the most intuitive plan to me. But it could make sense. I'm not saying it's wrong. This might still be your preparation, because you said you started the game on move 14. Maybe the idea is you want to play bishop g7 and f5, and you could argue your king's safer with the bishop on g7, even if white can open the h-file. So I see the argument. I'd be tempted now, though, if I was white, to maybe take on f6 and not let you tuck this bishop away and guard the king, and now you have weak dark squares, and now I want to play h5. Just something to consider. That's why I think g6 isn't such a popular move in this position. But okay, on to the middle game. h5, bishop g7. I guess you're not too worried about h6 because you're just going to play bishop h8 and probably maybe f5 in the near future. But white opens the file, h takes, and you had a long think here about which way to capture. Yeah, it's an interesting choice here. If you take with the h-pawn, you're taking towards the center, but you're also opening up the h-file here. And if you take with the f-pawn, you get a nice open file for your rook, but that also means you can't play for the f5 pawn break. So it is an interesting choice. It's not immediately clear to me which one is better. You would have to carefully kind of weigh the pros and cons there, but I kind of like f takes g6. That looks good for your piece development. So now queen to d3, bishop e6. Yeah, that's a good square for the bishop. And white castles along and sacks the f2 pawn, and you decide to take it. And you say, poison pawn, question mark. No, I don't think so. I think that's just a free pawn. I can't really see a downside to taking it. Your rook's active there, you win a pawn. I think black has a good position. You have the pair of bishops. Now, the only concern with this fianchetto setup is d6 is super weak. So you definitely have to watch out for that. But for the time being, you won a pawn. So now bishop e2. Now, the g2 pawn looks a little bit more risky to grab because now your rook's off an open file and deep in enemy territory. You see, you're still not dealing with knight c6. Not too sure what you mean by that. You mean that it's undefended? True, it's just hard to see how white really exploits that. To me, I think I'd rather just play a5 here, though. Just trying to play b4 and blow open lines to the white king. That's kind of the whole purpose of why you played rook b8 so early on anyways, right? So that seems to be a good kind of justification for where your pieces are, and it leaves the rook on an open file. And then white would have to worry about b4. They'd still have to worry about rook takes g2. I think that's a pretty promising choice, but okay, you take on g2 and win a second pawn. Certainly 2 pawns is often a decisive material advantage, so white certainly has to prove something here. White plays king b1. Now you played queen g5, and you said you thought forming this battery would stabilize this side of the board, but you should have done it on the open file, starting with rook f2. Yeah, maybe. I still kind of like just a5. Seems to make sense to me. We have opposite side castling. Why not kind of use this hook that white gave you, this c3 pawn, to create pawn tension? Kind of going back to that pawn breaks idea we talked about in Module 3. But okay, you played queen g5. Now came knight c to e3. Rook g3. Okay, pinning the knight to the queen. You might have some threats here. You might be threatening to... Well, I guess you have to be careful because it comes with check, huh? I guess it's not as easy as I thought to just remove that defender, but okay. Rook d to f1, and knight a5. Yeah, bringing the knight to c4 makes sense here, especially with this knight being pinned here on e3. So white kind of has to play b3 to keep you out, but that's another concession, moving another pawn around the king. I see, and now you want to route this knight to c5. Okay. That approach seems pretty promising. I think black's quite a bit better here. I mean, you're up 2 pawns. Okay, rook f3, knight c5, an in-between move. I guess white has an in-between move of their own. You said you could feel everything starting to unravel. I'm not too sure what you mean. The knight maneuver lost your initiative to him. Why do you feel that way? Oh, I see. There might be some tactical problem here is what you're saying because of knight e7. Yeah, I don't think it's anything as vague as, we lost our initiative or something. I think you just miscalculated that there's knight e7 at the end of this line. And then this problem I mentioned a long time ago with the d6 pawn kind of makes itself felt. That's why it's important to always be aware of the weaknesses. You might not think they matter for the time being, but often, later tactical patterns are going to be based on those weaknesses. So now, yeah, if white had to retreat the queen here, I'd be pretty happy here as black, but yeah, now there is knight e7 and queen takes d6. And now the play becomes pretty forcing, it looks like. So, okay, you take their knight, they check you away. Okay, you have bishop f6. But now, okay, there's going to be some kind of combination here. Your king's very exposed. Takes. Ooh, nice one. Okay, knight d5. Ouch. And that's game over. Yeah, you mentioned king g7. Well, I don't know. Well, I guess the bishop's hanging. There is something to kind of, hope for here. Yeah, this actually isn't just, as straightforward as a win for white as I thought. The rook is still hanging. E4 is hanging with check. The bishop's hanging. You give this line. Okay, this is the computer line. Okay, rook takes e6, check, takes. Yeah, but total tactical insanity. This is all about just pure calculation in a position like this. Okay, check. Wow, and it gives you a draw here, really. White has nothing better than that? I kind of find that hard to believe, but I guess if that's what your computer told you, I guess I believe it. That's a very interesting, way the game could have ended. But I think you were better pretty much the whole game. You totally outplayed him in the early middle game. It was just this tactical mistake of allowing knight e7 with check followed by queen d6 that you didn't calculate out all the way, and seems like the complications there favor white. So I guess having the queen stray from defending the e7 square was a very key point there, and you should have been aware of the weakness. I think that's the main thing. We can blame it on the miscalculating, but it's a very hard line to calculate all the way through. The important thing is to be aware that this pattern exists, to be looking out for knight moves followed by queen takes d6, and I don't think you really were based on your annotation. So very important that you're always aware of the weaknesses, and that can really help inform your move by move checks, captures, threats, candidate move analysis. But overall, good game. You kind of blew it there with a little tactical mistake there, and then total craziness ensued, and white came out on top. But for the most part, I think you outplayed white. Keep it up. All right, now we've got another game here from Justin, and I loved what you said in your email, by the way, about how of all the things you've done to work on chess, really being forced to go through this process of playing games and annotating them has been the most high-yield thing you've ever done. So I'm really glad this program's helped you out with that so far, and I'll be happy to take a look at this game as well. All right, so you have the white pieces here. You gave some notes here about how you switched from e4 to d4 because you were kind of overwhelmed in those openings. I've never heard of someone switching away from e4 because of the Scandinavian defense. That's a first. But it's understandable. Everyone kind of has their, their kryptonite that they hate facing. But okay, here we go. You said you don't really understand the plans in the Semislav, so hopefully I can help you out here. d4, d5, c4, c6. Okay, we get we transposed with Semislav, sure. And you're playing the e3 line. And black plays bishop e4. So I'm not too familiar with this move in the Semislav. Usually that's not what black does here. Usually black just plays knight b to d7, and then after you move the bishop, that's when they can take on c4 and play b5, and force you to kind of waste a tempo. So let's actually see here if this move is ever really played. Yeah, wow, hardly ever. So yeah, knight b to d7, the move I suggested, and I play myself as black here. Almost 25,000, bishop e4 has only been played 100 times, and white scores very, very well. I don't think white scores so well here because it's objectively, an abysmal move. I think it's just because players who play bishop b4 here don't really know too much about the opening. Because to me, it doesn't make too much sense. So I like bishop d3 here. Okay, and black plays queen a5. So black's trying to play this like Cambridge Springs style. You might be familiar with the Cambridge Springs defense, which would be here if you don't play e3, if you bring the bishop out to g5, and we get some kind of position like this, then there's some ideas where black does indeed play queen a5 and bishop b4, thinking about playing knight e4 and just trying to pile up on this knight. But with the bishop locked in on c1, it doesn't make as much sense. It's not going to be so hard for white to parry these threats, and it seems kind of superficial. So, okay, in the game, knight f3, bishop b4, bishop d3, queen a5, queen c2. Sure, I think that's reasonable. Yeah, black doesn't have any real threat here. Well, maybe, can they play knight e4 now? I just want to see if we have to calculate this. You said your thought was queen c2 continues your development, and we'll cover c3. Could have covered with bishop b2 as well, but that goes to your earlier point. Never sure of where to put the bishop in this opening. Yeah, the bishop's a bit tricky in this opening. You can put it on g5, but if you ever move the bishop to g5, you have to watch out for black's lines where they actually take on c4 and try to hold on to the pawn, because you would have to kind of delay e3 in those lines. Often, in these kind of lines, it goes to b2 in some cases. You can play b3 and bishop b2. Sometimes it goes to d2. Sometimes it just sits here on c1 until you can play for the e4 pawn break, and then it can move later on. But here, though, so black just plays h6, which makes no sense. That's horrible. But I wonder if they could play knight e4. And the point here is, even though you have enough attackers here to win a pawn here, it's not that simple, right? Because if you win the pawn, then of course comes bishop takes c3. But then again, maybe even just takes, maybe even knight back to d2. I don't know. You could get some interesting position like this. You could also maybe just castle on knight e4. What if we just castle here and let black win a pawn if they want it? Something like this. I don't know. It feels like we have some pretty decent compensation here for a pawn. Black's way behind in development. Just some things to consider. h6 doesn't make too much sense, though. So, okay, you castle, you free the knight from the pin. Good. Bishop takes, b takes. Yeah, so this is not the kind of opening where black can be satisfied just to double your pawns here, because you can trade off your c-pawn anytime you want. So all black did was give you the bishop pair and bring a pawn of yours closer to the center. So you're playing fine. White has an advantage here. You debated taking with the queen to offer an exchange. Nah, I don't like it. You have a space advantage. Why trade queens? I think your queen's better placed than his. I think you can maybe go for it. I like that you're trying to fight this urge you talk about to get the queens off the board. So I like b takes c3. Plus, you bring a pawn closer to the center. So now, castles. Let's see here. Castles. D takes c4 first. Bishop takes c4. Castles. And you played bishop d2. I don't think you have to move that bishop right now. I think you're in a rush to move this bishop because, you want to connect your rooks. But we kind of talked about how you have to be concrete in the opening. It's not just about connecting your rooks. Isn't this the perfect time to play e4? And just grab the full center, play e5 next turn. Now your bishop has a much better diagonal to be on. And it seems like white's just clearly better there. You just play e4, e5, bishop back to d3, bishop somewhere, maybe even bishop takes h6. Just seems very hard for black to play this position. So kind of a perfect point to what I talked about there in Module 4, how I think, a lot of players just think, how can I connect my rooks and obey everything the opening books taught me as a beginner, instead of, how can I really maximize the benefit of my position? And I think here e4 is a much better move. But okay, bishop d2, certainly white still has to be better here. b5, that only helps you. Bishop d3, the bishop's better there anyways, and now you can consider playing a4 and blowing open more lines before black gets their pieces into the game. So this is good for you. Queen c7. And you play a4, I think that's fine. I think still e4 is what I would prefer. You want to prevent the b-pawn advance. Why? If b4, you just win a pawn, right? That seems easy enough. And you mentioned some good things about this move, and they're all true, but you said you didn't consider anything else. To me, it's hard to imagine not considering e4 here. Any move that, gains more space in the center should probably always be considered. Just something to consider in the future when you're trying to come up with candidate moves. So far, you're playing very well, though. Certainly no blunders or anything, so good job. So a4, bishop b7. Okay, rook fe1. Giving more support for the e4 push. You don't need any more support for the e4 push. You just do it. What more support do you need? And you kind of point this out after the game. So that's good that you kind of came up with this takeaway on your own, and hopefully you won't make that mistake again. You've also said you should have considered taking on b5 and winning a pawn. Well, certainly you better consider it. It's a check, capture, or threat, right? Yeah, you have to consider this. The critical line, of course, goes like this. And you win a pawn, but you get the double pawns, and you would have to evaluate, is it worth it, is it worth it or not? And whatever answer you come up with there, I'm fine with, as long as you at least consider it, right? If you don't consider it, then yeah, that's definitely a problem. So in the game, after rook e1, a6, now you play c4, and you don't have a good explanation for this move. You were hoping to open up the queen side. Nah, I mean, okay, you can try to play on the queen side. To me, it seems so much easier to play on the king side, though. And you just played this move to support the e4 pawn break, so I think you're kind of all over the place here. Black gifted you a big advantage out of the opening, they just were super slow developing and gifted you the whole center, but you're not really doing anything with it. So here I think e4 is once again a very natural move. Maybe you follow up with knight e5, maybe with e5, but you're going to get a big attack. Then you can lift a rook to e3, kind of justify your previous move. I mean, what does black do? If you play e4, they can't stop e5. They have no move that can stop it, other than e5 themselves, but that's terrible. And then where does the knight go? If it goes to g4, it's actually trapped, h3. If it goes to d7, then where's this knight go? Black just has all kinds of problems here if you play e4. So I think you should play it. But okay, c4, takes. Okay, now there's an obvious target here on c6. Hopefully you kind of noticed this. Now I hope your plan is maybe, rook c1, knight e5, pile up on this guy. I wonder if you mentioned the weakness here. But okay, black tries to get rid of it, which they probably should. So c5, and you say the d-pawn is falling, so you want to install your dark bishop in its place. I don't know if it's falling. I don't know what would make you say that. Maybe you're afraid of bishop takes f3. To me, I feel like you can play bishop e2 here and just pin this pawn. That seems better to me, because then they can't take on d4, and now the pawn is still a target, and you can just play a rook to c1 next, and black has to deal with this problem. You would have to do some calculation here. I guess black could play, knight d7. Which rook? Doesn't really matter. Let's say rook a to c1. Still threatening to win this pawn. Maybe here rook f to c8. And now, do we have like bishop b4? I don't know if this works. It's something to at least consider, though. How does black defend this pawn? I feel like black would actually get decent compensation for it now, though, because we're being pretty awkward with the bishop. We might have to, be pinned ourselves on the c-file if we win a pawn. But you have to at least consider it. So I think bishop c3 is giving in too easily. So, okay, you're kind of okay with the double pawns. Bishop takes, g takes, the only option. You didn't think it was much of a threat. Yeah, to me it doesn't feel like much of a threat. Black has no pieces around my king, so I don't really care that much. And now I have the pair of bishops, which I like. C takes, bishop takes. Yeah, still feel like white's better. You have the pair of bishops in a wide open position. Knight b to d7, he has to improve it, and you wondered why not knight c6. Well, if knight c6, now the knight is kind of blocking the queen on this file. Probably there you just take on f6. And I don't know, maybe even move the bishop away and try to play rook c1. I don't know. Knight d7 seems more natural to me to reinforce this knight, so you can't just take on f6. Okay, and you mentioned this, I think, after the game. Okay, bishop takes f6. Okay, good. So you play here f4, taking up space, limiting the queen's movement. Probably wouldn't have been my first choice, but I see some of the logic. Good job kind of seeing, by the way, that e5 is not possible here, because then, of course, bishop takes f7 and you win. So, okay, rook ac8, rook ac1, a5, rook e2. I don't fully understand that. Why not move the queen off the c-file here? You won't take the bishop. Yeah, so I kind of agree that moving the queen off is probably better, but I don't understand the logic at all of rook e2. What's the intention? Okay, knight g4, yeah, not a threat. h3, good, yeah, black's just wasting time. Bishop back to d3. I don't think you have to just give in and swap queens that easily, do you? And if you do, there's probably a better square. Why not maybe bishop b5 or bishop a6? Those seem more pressing to me. Like bishop a6 here, they can't really move the rook away because of the queen, and now you kind of you get the file. That kind of works out nicely. So that looks more a better option to me. But okay, takes. I guess you still kind of get the file here too. This still looks better for white, even despite the double pawns. Okay, that rook is super passive. This pawn's a big target. Hopefully you notice some of this. Wasn't expecting that rook placement. Yeah, me neither. You can still carry out your plan. So let's see it. So what is the plan? Do you mention what your plan is? I'm trying to kind of read what the idea is. You mentioned doubling on the c-file, but I want to see kind of what your plan is here. To me, going after this pawn seems like the most obvious plan. It's the only weakness black has. So let's see how you do this. f3 I don't fully understand. You were planning on supporting the e4 push and clearing a square to centralize the king. Well, okay, but if you push e4, you have to make sure that this f-pawn's not going to be a target, which maybe it's not. It's kind of hard for black to reach, but usually when you have a double pawn structure like this, I kind of am tempted to leave it alone. Here, I mean, the only pawn that kind of supports the whole thing is the f2 pawn, and it's really hard to reach. If we start pushing these pawns forward, you have to be careful they don't become weak. So I kind of like here just rook c7 threatening rook a7. That seems very obvious to me, just coming down to the 7th rank. But okay, f3, knight d5. Yeah, so you already have to watch out for some of these double pawns. Bishop b5, that was your plan. I guess you're trying to eliminate this knight in some cases, followed by rook c5, which does make sense. Okay, plus you always like the bishop-pawn combo to defend each other. Okay, knight b4, rook c7, good. Okay, knight f8, that's a super passive knight. King g2, yeah, you kind of criticize this move. Again, I wonder if we can just play... Well, you have to be careful. I was going to say maybe rook a7. You have to watch out for knight c2, maybe? Trying to go after your bishop and this pawn. And if the bishop moves, then the rook's active, of course. But I think I agree with you, the king's better on f2 than g2. You might as well guard your e3 pawn. But okay, knight g6. King g3, limiting the movement. Okay, you're also kind of, stranding your king, though. It's not too useful here. I think it's still better on f2. But okay, knight d5, rook a7. This looks good to me. h4. So why not win the pawn? You said you see a potential threat to your e-pawn with rook c3, but there's a bishop here, isn't there? So, I mean, why not take the pawn and get a passed pawn? That's like the most important thing in an endgame. You make a passed pawn. That said, black seems to have pretty little counterplay here, so I can understand h4. I mean, h5 is a pretty big threat. Then I would have to go go somewhere pretty bad. And this pawn's still hanging. So let's see how this works out. So, okay, rook down to the back rank. You do play h5. And you said you also anticipated this. You might aim for some knight maneuver to pick off your f-pawn. I feel like this is still winning for you, though. It should be very winning. Your two bishops are so much better than the two knights in a wide open position like this. e4, okay, taking away the the square from the rook as well. Rook d1, okay, yeah, black has to go for something like a counterattack. And you played bishop b2. I kind of like bishop c5, threatening rook a8 and winning the knight. Black would have to, come up with an answer there. Bishop b2 gives up control of the g1 square too, which I don't really love that much. You could also consider just a forcing line, like what happens if we take. Although here we don't really have an appealing choice, right? If we take, we activate the knight, otherwise the pawn falls. If we take, not the most inspiring there. So I think bishop c5 might be the best move. Yeah, do you have to take? I don't know. Actually, you give bishop e8 in your notes, and that looks very strong here. Black actually can't defend this pawn. So maybe this would have worked, but you would have to see bishop e8, of course. But okay, bishop b2, knight e3, king f2, okay, f5, what's going on? Trying to force your way in. So why do you feel compelled to, mate the black king? Just grab your a-pawn and queen your a-pawn. That seems like the most obvious plan to me. Check, takes, e5. You're making this way too complicated. What's going on? You're, sacking pawns, trying to mate the black king with 3 pieces left on the board. You've had so many chances just to grab your pawn and go queen your a-pawn. I don't know why you're not, not doing it. Knight d4, takes, okay, check, okay. You never grabbed the a-pawn and you let them take the a-pawn. And now you just settle for this perpetual check. Interesting. Anything better here? Guess it's kind of hard to say. But I hope some of those comments helped you out there. First of all, in the middle game, certainly pushing e4 looked very, very strong. And then in this endgame, I'm not sure what you were doing exactly. You could have won the a-pawn. You had so much better pieces than black. You had the 2 very active bishops. You had the very active rook. Black had 2 passive knights and a passive rook. But then instead of just, grabbing the a-pawn and queening yours, you tried to mate the black king or something. And I guess you got a perpetual check out of it, but that was not the most obvious plan to me. But all in all, good game. Keep up the good work. I really love the annotations. They were very detailed, and that really helped me out. All right, next up we've got Steven, and you have the black pieces here, so let's go ahead and take a look. So d4, knight f6, c4, g6, and you said you weren't too sure why you played the King's Indian. You used to play it when you started chess, but you haven't in a year, and bishop f4 threw you off. So what was your intention when you played g6 here? Because you played g6 before white played bishop f4, so were you going to go for a Grunfeld or something, or what's your normal opening here? That would help me kind of understand what you're trying to do. But yeah, bishop f4 is a pretty weird move. Let's see how this works out. Sometimes when white plays this, you can even play for a quick knight d7 or e5. That's one other plan. So let's see how this goes. Okay, e3, bishop g7, knight c3, castles, And yeah, we kind of are in a King's Indian, but white never played e4, so we're going to be playing kind of the more positional kind of lines. Here I think knight h5 makes some sense, just trading off this bishop and grabbing the bishop pair and making sure this bishop has no counterpart. Kind of like that idea, and then you can play c5 or something later. Maybe after knight a6, maybe after knight d7. Also still playing for e5 could work in some cases, might have to take some preparation here. But even, knight d7, rook e8, and e5 in some cases could be good. Bishop f5 is interesting, but often when you play g6, you have to be careful because the bishop doesn't have a good retreat. So you have to make sure that the bishop's not going to get trapped here, especially if you ever play, e6 or something. Bishop d3 from white, that doesn't make any sense. Why would white want to trade off this, vulnerable bishop? Okay, takes. Rook e8, b4, so white's grabbing a lot of space here on the queen side. And to me, it seems intuitive to play for e5. I would still like probably knight d7, knight h5. And you give a6 here with no comment. Certainly if you're going to play a6, you have to tell me why, because that's not an obvious developing move. You give a lot of moves here with no comment. And now came c5. And, okay, good annotation here. This is how a lot of players think. You said you didn't want to have to, consider the ramifications of the pawn tension every single turn. So you kind of gave in and captured, which is probably not the best idea. Yeah, I don't think it is either. You're going to open up the b file here for white and, give white a lot of pressure on that b7 pawn. I think here you can actually just play knight c6 and target this b pawn. And now if they play b5, now they kind of justify your a6 move. You get a nice open a file there. And if they take, you don't care about that. So I think knight c6 here is actually promising. Plus, you can think about e5. You have to be careful, of course. Maybe knight h5 and then e5. But I think that might have been a better choice. Okay, takes, b6. Again, not sure how you can give that move with no comment. It seems like a pretty committal decision to me, but okay, takes. And we kind of have the Grunfeld-type pawn structure, where white has the central pawn majority, 5 on a 4, and you have the outside majority, 2 on 1, which could be very promising in an endgame. But in the middle game, you have to watch out for white just kind of taking over the center. And you don't really give any comments about too much of this or what your plan is, so maybe try to be a bit more detailed on the annotations. You have some good ones here. I'd just like to see a bit more detail about kind of, what your plan is. But let's take a look. So castle, knight c6, knight b4. Okay, you have the idea of moving the knight to d5. Well, okay. White can eventually try to drive you away. I guess it could be one plan. To me, you never really mentioned the most defining characteristic of the position, though, which is the pawn majorities. That's like the number one thing that defines how this position is played, I believe. So, okay, knight d5, takes. Yeah, I like taking with the queen there because it can't be easily kicked away, and you don't want to allow, a quick e4. It does allow rook c7, though. I think all in all, black's all right here. I kind of like the long-term chances of the queenside pawn majority, and your pieces are all pretty active except for this rook, so let's see. Okay, pawn to b5, rook c1. So b5, you give it with no comment. That seems like a very important tempo to waste, to let white double on the a file. Why not play, I guess you could play your rook c8. I'm not sure if it's good or bad, but you have to at least consider it. But okay, b5, rook c1, queen e6. Again, not sure how you can give that with no comment. That's a pretty, funny looking move. Again, maybe it's good. Maybe you want to play knight d5. I'm guessing that's the idea. I just prefer to see why. But okay, rook c6, queen d7, okay, knight e5. Yeah, you're just walking into to tempo after tempo, not really doing anything. So I feel like you weren't really being very concrete here. But okay, you play queen b7, potentially trying to think about playing rook ac8 is my guess. White plays f3, trying to think about expanding in the center. Notice how I'm always trying to figure out what both players are doing. This is what you have to do in your games too. Whenever you see a move, try to understand why your opponent's playing it. I'm not saying to read their mind. I know some players have misunderstood me and they start trying to, predict, what the opponent's going to do. But think about what the move does that's good for their position and what their candidate moves could be. So, okay, you play rook c8. That makes sense, trying to kind of alleviate your cramp on the c file, but you never had to allow that in the first place. And now d5, interesting. Yeah, this isn't looking good for you, because white's kind of taken over the center like I warned you about, and now if you take on c6, they could get a strong passed pawn. So you play rook d8, now comes e4. Yeah, I think white's ideas have kind of won out. That's why you have to understand the ideas. If you would have understood that white's play is going to revolve around the central pawn majority, you might have been a little more cautious about kind of allowing this. So knight e8, let's see here. I'm not sure why white just trades off everything. Okay, they don't trade off everything. They come to c6. That makes sense. Trying to potentially threaten knight takes e7, I guess, is the idea. Because now if you take, the rook's hanging. So you get out of this tactic with king h8. That makes sense. Queen b4, piling up on this vulnerable e7 pawn. And you're still in the game up to this point, but here I think you just blundered a pawn. You played a5, just forgetting that, I mean, you're losing a free pawn here multiple different ways. Queen takes a7, queen takes e7, so I'm not too, well, okay, maybe not queen takes e7, although I think it works. You can't just remove their defender, can you? This doesn't work, right? I mean, yeah, nothing works here. So yeah, it's a free pawn two different ways, and you said you're low on time. So play longer time controls. Try not to play time controls where you're going to get low on time. Unless, it's already a 45-45 game and you just spent a long time thinking in the middle game. But I don't think that's what happened. Okay, but white decided to take the a pawn instead. Bishop d4 check. Isn't that a free piece? Okay, simple one-move blunder, and you just forgot there's no actual pin on the c-file because the bishop controls the rook. Okay, yeah, that's a shame. It was a very good competitive game there for 25 moves. It was going to be all about those plans, no blunders, very good stuff. And then, unfortunately, I think you kind of lost your focus in time trouble, and that decided the game. So keep it up. Try to play longer time control games, because unfortunately, I think what's going to happen here is you're going to kind of chalk this up to time trouble. And I'm not saying you're wrong to do so. Certainly, time trouble probably influenced you here. But if you really play longer time control games where you can't just chalk up your tactical mistakes to time trouble, that's really going to, first of all, result in some much higher quality games where we can really examine, the battles here in the pawn structure and that kind of stuff. And secondly, just give you a chance to practice that thought process better and hold yourself more accountable so you have nothing to really blame any mistakes on, whether rightly or wrongly. But very nice game overall. It's a shame it was kind of spoiled by just a couple tactical blunders here. Now you're up, Tom, and you have a game here with the black pieces, so let's take a look. And you said you wanted to better understand your opponent's threat here at the end, so let's take a look. Okay, we get a Ponziani. Interesting. Been a while since I've seen a Ponziani. Yeah, d5 is one of the main moves. And wow, d4. Interesting. So I agree that's a bad move. I'm just not sure about your particular answer to it. So you took on d4 first. I think here, though, white could have played e takes d5. And now you can't take with tempo, so you have to do something here. You probably have to take the pawn, but now they're going to take. And then they can play knight c3, and now we're playing a standard kind of IQP position, but now knight c3 is going to come with tempo. So I don't love your answer here. I'm wondering if you calculated out any other candidate moves, because you don't mention any. You just give e takes d4. I think the better response to d4 is not e takes d4. It's going to be d takes e4. Attacking this knight and now threatening this d4 pawn. And if white goes for this, with knight takes e5, then this looks pretty good for you. Kind of a symmetrical, funny-looking pawn structure here, but white can't castle, and I like black's position. So I don't love e takes d4, and you don't mention the alternative. So always be concrete, especially in this kind of position with double pawn tension. You have to consider everything. All your checks, captures, threats. But okay, takes. They take back. That doesn't look great, because now we can just take on e4. And okay, they go for queen e2 here, trying to kind of save their position a little bit. But this looks very sketchy for white, of course, blocking in the bishop. So now bishop e4 check. I kind of like your reason there, so that if you have to play queen e7, you're not going to block in the bishop. Bishop d2. You take right away. I don't love that. Why help white develop? Right? I don't want to help white develop. Why not play queen e7 right away? Just defending your pawn, and then if they take on b4, now they're kind of helping you out. You get to give this check. If they block with a knight, then b2 falls, and the rook could be, in a little bit of trouble depending on what happens. So again, it's a question of maintaining the tension, right? Develop a piece. Don't just give in and let white develop something. But okay, takes, knight f6. Now they get their pawn back. But it's still good for you because you can castle when their queen's horrible here on e2. So rook d1, and now isn't the game over? I mean, there's going to be a big problem here on the e file. So takes, rook e8. You said you missed knight e5. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, so we can't just play f6 here because then comes bishop c4 check and things get kind of complicated. Do they? Can we meet bishop c4 check with bishop e6? Do we have to watch out for d5 or something? Let's just look at it. So f6, certainly white's only critical move here is bishop c4 check. And now what's going on here? I guess after bishop e6 they do have d5, huh? And now they're threatening to open lines to our queen as well. So after something like, knight takes e5, d takes e6, yeah, now they're threatening our queen, they're threatening e7. This is annoying. Wow, okay, so white has this kind of miracle resource. That's unfortunate. So after knight e5, okay, what's going to happen here? You play here queen f6. I think you had a nice choice here to play bishop e6. just, first of all, threatening the a2 pawn. Secondly, threatening possibly bishop d5 followed by f6. They have so many things lined up on the e-file, they can't really evacuate it all in time. Even if they move the queen out of the way, they still have to watch out for f6, because it's a pin to the king. And what do they do here? They can't really play d5 now, because now we just, well, what do we play here? Why does this move keep coming up and causing us problems? That's just another move you could consider, though. Queen f6 is probably good, too. I guess you're still threatening knight takes e5. Can they play f4 here? That's going to be my concern now. Let's see. So they play bishop c4. Now, okay, so can we take on e5 now? Knight takes e5. And, okay, they just castle. So they give us a piece for the time being, but now we're pinned here on the e-file is the point. Certainly there's got to be a way to kind of extract this knight from its predicament, though. So you played bishop f5. That looks promising. Queen g6 was my first thought, just threatening the queen. The queen can't take on e5 yet. And where does the queen go? The queen has to maintain some kind of pin here to the rook, otherwise we're just going to be up a piece, but then they have to watch out for all kinds of stuff, like, I don't know, I was thinking threats like bishop h3 or knight f3. Let's see what happens in the game, though. So bishop f5, queen d5, well, yeah, now we're just winning, right, because we can just trade off, and we're just up a piece for good. Oh, but why give up the c7 pawn? That doesn't make sense. Why not play c6? I don't understand why you'd want to give up a pawn. And yeah, you mentioned that in your note, so that's good. So, okay, takes, d7. Okay, should still be totally winning, though. Takes. Oh, and you just blunder. Okay. Well, you asked for clarity about the threat at the end. I mean, it's just a simple back rank tactic, right? You just play h6, and you're totally winning. It's really that simple. Yeah, it just comes down to number one, pattern recognition, and number two, like we've talked about in the course, before you play any move, always being aware of your opponent's checks, captures, and threats. Certainly, rook e8 should have been a candidate move to consider. You have to always consider every single one of your opponent's checks, captures, and threats before you play a move. And here I think you just kind of slipped up and forgot to do that. But not bad, good game. I love how you punished white for not castling early enough. You won the piece, then you extracted the knight, got it out of the pin yourself. And you should have had a very easy win. You just unfortunately made a one-move blunder, and that's all it really came down to. So keep it up. Just make sure to blunder check better in the future, and your rating is definitely going to be on its way up. Bernie, you are up next, and you have the black pieces in this game. And let's get to it. So you play the Scandinavian defense. Okay, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, queen a5. White plays bishop c4. And here you say c6 makes no sense. Isn't c6 one of the main moves in this line? I'm just curious to check. Yeah, c6 is the main move, so how can you say it makes no sense? Very often in this line of the Scandinavian, where white plays the early knight c3 and kicks your queen to a5, black eventually plays c6 just so they can drop their queen back to c7. Then you can move the bishop outside the pawn chain somewhere, either f5, g4, then you can play e6. And after d4, you get a very typical Yaroslav pawn structure, which we talked about in module 3. So bishop g4, I mean, positionally it's fine. Isn't this just a tactical blunder, though? This is like a very, well, does it work here? At first I thought you couldn't play this because of bishop takes f7 and knight takes, knight e5 check. But I forgot this doesn't work. The queen's on a5. Sorry, that's not a pattern I'm very familiar with because my queen's not usually on a5 this early. But yeah, okay, so it doesn't work here. That's good. Hopefully you saw that, though. You have to see that, of course. Hopefully you at least calculated out bishop takes f7. But okay, here they play bishop back to e2. That doesn't make any sense. Now you're pretty happy. Okay, good. e6, castle, bishop e7. You said bishop d6 might have been a more active move. Yeah, yeah, probably. I think you're playing fine, though. So now h3. I don't really love giving up a pair of bishops. I don't really see a motive to do that. And you play it. Okay, you're doubting if bishop takes f3 is a good idea because if you retreat to h5 and he plays g4, he's overextending. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you don't have to fear g4 here. Definitely not. Especially when he's castled, you're not. I mean, now he's almost inviting us to castle long if he's going to play this way. So definitely no reason to fear g4 here. Yeah, so I agree with your after-game annotations. No reason to trade off and activate his bishop. But okay, takes, c6, d3, knight d7, knight e4, rook d8. Okay, you give a lot of moves here with no annotations. So that's not great. Did you consider castling long? I would at least consider it. I'd probably reject it, though, and castle short. The king's going to be safer on the king side. Bishop d2, queen c7. Yeah, very typical Yaroslav pawn structure, except white never played d4. So that kind of gives us a license to maybe play knight e5 at some point, maybe just play c5 ourselves at some point. But black has no weaknesses here, which is great. So castles, rook, queen c1, no idea what white's doing. This is very weird. Takes, I don't know though, because if we take, we give white the chance to play d takes e4, and objectively it's probably not bad, but now we're just in this very symmetrical pawn structure, and I don't love that, especially with white having the pair of bishops. I just wouldn't be too sure what my plan should be in a position like that. So I kind of like keeping the pawn structure how it is, and maybe just playing, maybe knight e5 looks like an active move, just trying to eye this bishop. I guess we have to watch out for bishop e2 and f4 though, huh? I think objectively this is fine though. You trade off a set of pieces, you have a little less space than white, I guess, and you can just play knight f6 and relieve your cramp a little bit. Bishop f4, okay, that's not a big deal. Okay, bishop e6, I guess that's fine. Takes. Good. Now we're doubled on this file. c5, b6. Can we just play... I was going to say, can we play c4 right away? I guess then there's a concern, though, because queen takes a7 and b7's hit. So yeah, b6 makes sense to me. Rook a to d1, queen d7. Yeah, I kind of like this. You might have an idea to bring this knight to d4, and if white ever plays c3, then d3 could be super weak. That's kind of far-fetched, though. It's not so easy to get the knight to d4, huh? I think the game's probably just equal, which I guess we can be happy here with black. I mean, white played very unambitiously. They never played, d4 and grabbed the center. They just kind of went for a position with no weaknesses, so it's hard to do much against that. But you can be happy with equality and, try to grind them out in the late middle game and the end game. So let's see how that plan plays out here. G3, rook d4, okay. Knight d5, takes, looking good. Okay, good. All right, yeah, just kind of barreling down on this file. Takes, and this looks good for you. Very good job finding a pawn break. That's awesome. You don't really mention it or anything. Okay, you do mention it up here. Your plan's to play c4 and open the file for the rooks. So good. Certainly black's a little bit better here. Hard to say if it's winning. Well, it's definitely not winning. Hard to say if you can grind it out for a win. Just because white really only has one weakness and they can guard it very easily. But let's see how it goes. So rook e3. Okay, king f8. King f1, king e7, king e2, e5. Yeah, I don't love playing this with the king on the e file. I'd rather just play king d6 first or something. a5 also makes sense, I think, just trying to roll the kingside pawns. But okay, c3, takes. Okay. Well, you have to calculate very concretely if you're going to go to the king and pawn endgame, right? Especially one like this, where it's going to be opposite side majorities. So it's not clear at all to me what the result should be. Here I would have to calculate very carefully. The only concern you have to watch out for is you don't want to let white create an outside passed pawn. Right? You don't want to let white make a passed pawn on the queen side, then force your king to go guard it, and then the king munches all the kingside pawns. So let's see how this goes. f5 makes sense. You have to push your majority. c4, king d6, this all makes sense. Here, could we play a5? The only concern is if we play a5, could they play c5? You have to watch out for some ideas like this, where they do make the outside passed pawn. Even this is honestly very hard to assess, because I could see lines where black could make another passed pawn of their own, and if black can make two passed pawns to occupy the king, then the king can just go munch the passed pawns and black could win, but that seems very hard. How does black make another passed pawn? Meanwhile, this pawn's going to distract the king's going to eat this pawn, and I think black might be too slow to make another passed pawn. The king could come in while white's worried about the passed pawns. It's a lot to calculate, so you can't go to these king and pawn games lightly. If you're ever going to go to one, they're a lot more dangerous than they look. They're almost pure calculation. So don't go to one if you're not sure. It's totally fine to just stay in the equal rook in game. That's a very safe draw. But okay, so let's see what happened here. So king d6, b4, g5, okay, f3, h5, g4, takes. Whoa, what's going on here? That passed pawn doesn't win. The king was inside the box of the pawn. I think you just didn't calculate this. So did you even mention any calculation here? You said you came up with a bad plan, and that's kind of very telling, because this isn't about planning. Like, this is pure calculation. Like, when you're playing this f4, there's no plan. Like, f4 either wins, loses, or draws. That's all. In a king and pawn endgame, you can calculate everything to the very end, because there's no, real moving parts. So you can't tell me it's a bad plan. It's a win, loss, or draw, and you have to know. And the answer, unfortunately, is that it's a loss. I'm kind of curious what happened if you don't go crazy here, though. What if you just take back? I mean, still very hard to assess. I don't feel great about this with black, because now white can just play king e4. They're going to deflect me with c5, and then pick up my e-pawn, and then pick up the g-pawn, and I don't think I can pick up the a-pawn and queen my a-pawn in time. But you would have to calculate it. I mean, that's just my gut instinct. You would have to actually sit there and calculate it out. There's no shortcuts here, and you can't play a king and pawn endgame based on a plan. It's very, very calculation heavy. So I hardly have to ask what happens after you make this pawn sacrifice. It just doesn't work. Yeah, the g5 pawn wins. Okay, and you resign. Yeah, again, very good game. A lot better than what I've seen from you in the past, Bernie. You played a very good game. You, I think, outplayed white in the middle game. You've got a slight advantage in the rook endgame. Just be a lot more careful in those king and pawn endgames. And you don't have to go into them in a lot of cases unless you're kind of forced into it. Even here at the end, you're still talking about how you couldn't come up with a plan in the king and pawn endgame, and I think you're kind of missing the point. You just have to be super concrete. So I hope that helps. Keep it up.